Mrs. Kindly had been a friend to the railway for many years. She lives in a lonely little cottage near the top station at Thomas's branch line. As the engines pass her cottage, they whistle, ring, or honk their horn as a cheerful hello. Time goes by in life, and like the engines, age comes. Mrs. Kindly is mostly indoors now due to weak bones around her legs, and she has to go on a wheelchair. She still goes out with her husband and kept a great big smile on her face towards the people and engines. One evening, Thomas was simmering at the top station. Just then, the station master ran towards them. "There's an emergency at the Kindly residence. You must go now. Bertie will take your passengers." "Yes, sir," whistled Thomas, and he puffed away with Annie and Clara behind him. When they reached the cottage, Mr. Kindly was weighing them down. "My wife, she's fallen over while trying to go up the stairs. She damaged her hip badly. I need help to bring her into your coaches. An ambulance is waiting, but it's too far for Wellsworth for us." Okay," replied Thomas nervously, as his crew ran in to help. There was no time to run round the train, so Thomas pushed his train backwards until he reached Edward Station. Stanley and Edward were surprised to see him. As the ambulance raced away from the station car park, Thomas told them the story. "Oh dear, I hope she's all right. But a woman at her age, it's very unlikely." "No, as long as we believe for sure she'll recover," said Thomas, and he puffed away. But throughout the rest of the evening, he was worried about Mrs. Kindly. The next morning, the Fat Controller called his engines to Tidmouth for news. "It's with deep regret that I must inform you that our dear friend Mrs. Kindly has passed away last night at Wellsworth Hospital. I advise you to show respect to Mr. Kindly, as well as their daughter, as well as their granddaughter." All the engines were quiet that morning as they went about their work. Thomas was alone in a siding, and a small tear came from his eye. Later that day at the top station, Percy and Toby were reminiscing about the Kindleys. I remember that Christmas party we had in her honour 62 years ago, a year after saving Thomas from a landslide back in Christmas 1951. And I remember the time she asked me to find stuff for her good luck package for the daughter. It's lucky for you, though, that the foreman was in good spirit that day when you borrowed those buffers, said Toby. Well, I got overexcited and I hadn't thought about it, puffed Percy. Then they looked over at Thomas, who just sighed sadly. Have you got any good memories of Mrs. Kindly, Thomas? Asked Percy. But Thomas just sighed, and he puffed away. Gordon was waiting at the junction. He'd noticed Thomas's sad expression. I know how you feel, Thomas. Just like me when I heard that Sir Nigel Gresley had passed on. Yes, Gordon. I was hoping Mrs. Kindly would get better, but the negativity kept overshadowing me. I guess I was wrong for hoping. Gordon wished steam at the remark. It's never wrong to hope all the time, but sometimes we have to be realistic and accept the fate that had happened. You believed that Mrs. Kindly would live after her nasty fall, but fate took her away, unfortunately. But it's life. Mrs. Kindly is still with us in our thoughts, though, Thomas. And he puffed away. The next day, the Fat Controller came to see Thomas alone at the sheds. Thomas, I want you to collect Jessica and Isabella Kindly at Dry Old Airfield. Yes, sir, yawned Thomas. As he arrived at the station, he saw Isabella and her daughter looking down about their mother's and grandmother's passing. I'm sorry for your loss. I was hoping that she'll live as well, but fate has a way realistically, and I almost gave up hope. But Gordon told me never to give up hope, but always look things realistically. She might be having a chat with a thin clergyman, as she is in a better place now. Everything changes in life if fate comes by surprise, but she's still with us in our minds and thoughts. Isabella and Jessica knew that Thomas was right. When the funeral arrived, the ceremony was held at Farquhar Church, and after hearing that Thomas was the one who helped them towards Wordsworth Hospital, he was given the honour of being the funeral train. As the coffin was loaded, all the branch line engines whistled and honked and rang as a last salute, and Thomas puffed away with the happy thoughts about the past of Mrs. Kindly.